Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the philosophy part. We come to the most meaningful and the most difficult to write segment of this analysis. Philosophy has been an important part of my life. It's helped me come to terms with a lot of hard-to-understand concepts, and also find the way to be comfortable with them. I can't remember what age I was, but I remember thinking about death a lot, and finally realizing that as a whole, it's not so bad. Everyone goes through it, and there's something eerily peaceful about it. Besides, it was fucking miles away anyway, so who cares, right? Philosophy in video games is another thing. An important thing. It's not an often thing, though. Jesus, I'm such a good writer. When looking at games that ponder philosophical questions, you run relatively dry. There's a certain drought in AAA games that... Well, we have some examples. Take Bioshock 1. Its main ideas were that of objectivism, the idea that we're responsible for ourselves and we should be concerned with the betterment of ourselves, striving towards success by that of hard work and innovation. A very capitalist-friendly idea, and Bioshock's goal was to show the potential downfall of those ideas when focused. Though where Bioshock failed was binding the gameplay to that philosophy, which is indeed a difficult prospect, but it's something that Amnesia and SOMA found to be very important. But yeah, there's a few games that ponder interesting questions about life in many ways. A few examples would be the Stanley Parable, the Talos Principle, Shadow of the Colossus, and of course fucking Dark Souls, since that game can't not be mentioned when it comes to any form of game design. I'm not even kidding, it's an amazing game. Now, the concepts covered in both Amnesia and SOMA are very important and meaningful. But which one takes the cake, I wonder? What are the two main themes in Amnesia and SOMA? I think it's safe to say they are that of morality for Amnesia and humanity for SOMA, so I'm going to explore the main questions asked and how they pull it off in their respective games. Let's start with Amnesia. Amnesia begs the question of how far would you go in order to preserve your own life. They explore this by revealing your own history from the perspective of a man who was terrified of this very concept. His slow descent into more and more despicable acts led to his own destruction, and there's something very important about that. Something that many, including myself, hold more dear than our own gain in life is our principles. For example, my opinion would never be sold. Or being straightforward with people to reach a goal instead of dancing around ideas in order to prevent hurt feelings is another one. I'm sure you may have noticed a bit of that in these videos. We all have these, and some of them aren't as strong as we'd like to profess. But killing a small child is something of a principle that is not only held at default, but ingrained in us by society regardless. Daniel engages in this act as his climax. It brings him out of the proverbial slow-cooking pot to a realization of everything that he's done in order to save his life. This game is less about teaching the player that killing little girls is wrong, and more about how easy it is to justify your actions when you're heading down a road that leads to your own fulfillment or success. I've met many people in my life who will sacrifice anything to be successful. Friendships, family, their own sense of what's right, even the truth. Because it's something that can ultimately get in the way. And sticking to it, staying strong, that's what shows real character. And that's what is the climax of the story in Amnesia. Attempting to redeem yourself for the awful actions you took and respectfully accepting the consequences if they come. It's sometimes only a matter of placing ordinary people in the right place to have them reach a level of viciousness that can rival the greatest of villains.
Yeah, so basically you place ordinary people in specific situations and they many of them start doing evil things. Just because of the role that they get to play. So I was just, shit, could we like have this in a video game? And I thought that one really cool thing about the video game is that you always think yourself as the hero. And how would people experience a game where you're put into the hero role and then it slowly emerges that you're, shit, I'm a shitty person, I've done shitty things. And are they gonna suppress it? Are they like gonna, shit, but that was in the past, and and like, how are they gonna think about that? And then it didn't turn out. Some people thought about it a bit. Some people were a bit nerd by it, but I didn't feel it had enough impact.
Frictional always wanted to have Amnesia be about exploring the limitations of morality and man's inhumanity to man. Exploring human emotion and its effect on certain actions you'll take when forced into horrifying and specific situations. Morality is a well-treaded subject that no one person can agree with 100% with another person. We all agree that murder is wrong, but then question things like abortion and euthanasia, which I don't have to get into here because it isn't covered by the game. Like I said, the game is more about a realization of what humanity is capable of. Even the best of us can be torn down. But the perseverance Daniel has is something that resides in us all, and that you can take steps towards redemption no matter what. Okay, so let's move on to SOMA, which finds itself asking a hell of a lot more and vast sets of questions. SOMA introduces you in a way that can confuse a lot of players, basically hitting you with the reality of the world without any pretense of explaining it. Sure, there are a few references to where the game is going, and if you know anything about the video game industry these days, then you'll know that a lot of the reasons you would enjoy a game are used to convince people to play them in the first place. Meaning there's a hell of a lot less surprise nowadays, and most people knew that SOMA was going to cover the question of humanity before they even played it.
And I feel that was a sort of failure on design. So for SOMA, we had another thematic going, and this is also, as I said, we wanted to do something new stuff, and it was very clear to me that, you know, running away from monsters is not going to be, we can't do the same thing again, so we have to have another hook. And this time, the hook test, we wanted to have the player going through an experience that talked about consciousness. and again, so similar to the other thing we wanted to have, I thought the first person perspective was going to be great for this, because, you know, you when you think about yourself as a conscious being, entity, whatever, you're almost thinking about yourself as a little guy or girl in front of a screen, sort of a homunculus, as you call it, the little small person in front of a screen. And, you know, when you're playing in, you actually are that, you know, you are the consciousness for another person. So it just felt perfect to have that. And then you just, this is going to be the main focus. We're going to do something out of this, and you know, that this is going to be our main selling point, which turned out to be difficult as hell, because, you know, all of these things were things that were over hours of gameplay to play out. Everything every direct example would be a huge spoiler, so couldn't talk about it, but would have to just say, you know, it's gonna be a consciousness. I know it's gonna be, you know, that's gonna be it. So how's the gameplay? And fuck the gameplay, that's not interesting. You know, this is what's interesting about the game. You know, almost like that. So, I was very hard getting into that, but again, that's sort of, you know, no one else is gonna do that, so let's this be our sort of the thing that makes this game stand out.
For those who weren't sure, though,
what did I just do?
So how do we define consciousness? There's a hell of a lot of theories, but some of the more prevailing ones are essentially being aware of what you are in the world around you. To break free of what you would feel comes naturally to you. There are other theories, of course, like for instance the word awareness alone, just being aware. There's a subtle beauty and terror to that, I think.
Yep, there we go. Like, it's exactly what I was saying in the whole concept of, if you copy a person's entire consciousness, are they alive? If they can think and make judgments for themselves, are they human? Like, where do you draw the line? What is the line? Like, I'm pretty sure that's the question this whole game is about. And it's awesome. It's awesome!
Christopher Odd does a fabulous opening to his Let's Play where he discusses this very idea, and it's a part of what makes him a very entertaining person to watch.
I'd like to start off by asking you a question. What is consciousness? For some, it's as simple as being able to think. For others, it's simply the ability to interpret electrical signals firing off in the brain. Yet further still, there are some people who believe that consciousness is the ability to reference millions of past experiences to build up your own reality. I think SOMA is really going to be about exploring the themes of consciousness and reality. What do they mean to you? How do you interpret thoughts? How do you interpret feelings?
So regardless of what you believe consciousness to be, what would the implications be if it could be transferred? Not to anything in particular, but if it were to be transferred, would that not naturally imply that what makes you is not in your body whatsoever? Or that it is at very least copyable? Does that diminish what it means to be human?
How weird is that? How weird is the thought of that if you just, like, take a scan of your brain, you would literally, like not you in this body, but you as, like, the entity inside a memory, you would just go on living as if you'd never died.
Would the person who was moved know that they were moved? Would they feel if your senses are connected to the body you control? Would they feel everything? Would you feel normal?
Hey there. How are you?
What the? This is incredible. We look so much alike. I'm looking into a mirror right now.
Yeah, if you say so. What's your designation?
My name's Adam Golaski. That's what you wanted, right? My name. What's your designation?
Chief Engineer Adam Golaski.
This is some sort of joke, right? Some sort of jape? I'm not your man for this kind of game.
Funny, I was just about to say the same thing.
So, I'm supposed to believe that you're me? No. And when's my birthday? You know what? When's my daughter's birthday?
October 16th. Wait, who the fuck are you to ask about my daughter?
Adam Golaski.
Adam Golaski, the busted tape deck.
It's not me up there. Some of it is. But some part of you, that's the offer. It's bliss. Eternal bliss among the stars. It's like poetry.
What were Dad's last words?
You serious? You're bringing up my father's death right now. That's off the rails, man.
Nobody knows about this. That it even happened. And this is something you can't just pull from the frame.
Don't let her go. He's laying there, dying, and the last thing he says to me, his last goddamn breath, he tells me to hang on to my wife.
Do you think maybe we could do this another time?
Try changing the subject. Challenge his experiences in relation to his
No,
body.
I'm not doing this. I'm sorry, but I'm not doing this.
How would you define what the difference between a person who lived through memories and a person who simply remembers them as well as you do? What makes them any less of what you are? Is it a sense of what's fair? That you literally participated in those events and committed to those actions, therefore you deserve to be the only master of your own consciousness? As if the world would be so kind. So is there a line? When does a simulation or a copy or a constructed AI or template for thought become something more? When does it become a genuine consciousness? If we gave something memories of events and people, the same memories as yourself, what would then be the difference?
This was the very question that consumed Arnold, filled him with guilt, eventually drove him mad. The answer always seemed obvious to me. There is no threshold that makes us greater than the sum of our parts, no inflection point at which we become fully alive. We can't define consciousness because consciousness does not exist. Humans fancy that there's something special about the way we perceive the world, and yet we live in loops as tight and as closed as the hosts do. Seldom questioning our choices, content for the most part to be told what to do next.
I have such a love-hate relationship with Westworld, such a beautiful concept delivered in later episodes with all the dexterity of a wrecking ball to the face, yet still manages to really touch on some important ideas. Anyway, dealing with this question, dealing with the idea of yourself being in another entity is alien and obstructive to us. Naturally, we want it to end. The mere thought of it starts to conflict with our sense of self-preservation. So then, why is it we can have our entire selves replaced over mere years and continue to speak as though it's of no consequence in comparison?
So it's a big thought thing. Like, your cells replace themselves entirely. Every single atom in your body changes out. Like, what is it? Every 7 years? Every 10 years? I forget what the exact time frame was, but every single cell in your body is replaced. Everything, and not just cell, every single atom in your body is replaced. Cycled out, made from new, yada yada yada. So it's really interesting to think about all of that as a continuation of who you are. Like, are you a different person because 7 years ago you were physically, literally a different person made up of different molecules that may follow different individual rules and nuances and stuff?
It is yet another concept difficult to manage, but if we can take parts of ourselves away, down to each individual atom, and manage to maintain the overall self, then what the bloody hell is consciousness? What are we? What counts as life, and what counts as data on a hard drive? And how can we trust a machine to know the answer?
Okay, so you make the copy, I get that. For that split, for that like one small moment, you're the exact same because no other experiences have happened. And at the first instance of something happening, then your copy and you are going to have different reactions, etc. I get that. But can you theoretically or realistically, if you could make a copy of your like consciousness, could you then experience that other level, that other copy, or are you just stuck with like the one you have like currently in the body, right? Let's say you implant it into a robot, that consciousness, and then you have to decide, okay, you can't even decide. Should you place the copy in the robot? I think it's like that's a copy, that's not the original. But the argument on the other side of that is, yeah, but it's a copy of you. I don't know, it's a paradox, man. That's crazy, and it's hurting everything that I have.
See, the thing is that it's just data, right? It's just data. In its actuality right now, it's just data. It only becomes something substantial once you start it up, and that's the time when Brandon comes back to life, but his like data starts to run. The simulation of his life starts to go. So what do I do? Do I want to open up to the potential of that ever happening again, or do I want to erase data, considering the idea that one day he could be brought back in a suit just like me? Who really knows these things? How would anyone know?
So we're acclimating to the idea that we are a robot.
I feel awful.
Interesting.
The robots only appear intelligent. They're much more like dogs than humans.
I wouldn't hit a dog.
Sorry, poor choice of words.
I don't want to hurt anything.
Well, we need a tool chip or we're stuck here.
Well, how would she feel if we took her tool chip?
Is a machine with a fully functioning human consciousness alive? And if so, what counts as death?
That is the one thing that does matter, because this could all be a simulation as well, and it could, like, life itself could be, you know, no one really knows what the meaning of life is because it's all up to everyone's personal preference. But my personal philosophy about that is, yes, this may all be fake, yes, it may not matter, yes, the actions of today may not influence anything, but the main thing that does keep me going in that aspect is, in this life that we have, I know that someday I will die. And I've accepted that fact in many ways, because I've been confronted by it, and I've been confronted by death many times. Not just me personally, but, you know, around me and stuff like that. So, philosophically speaking, I'm totally okay with the fact that I am going to die someday. And that's perfectly fine. Some people don't take meaning in that, but I do. I take meaning in the fact that I have this life, and even though what I do may or may not matter in the long run...
Where am I going? This isn't safe.
Okay, alright, I'll go back then. Fine by me. I don't want to be the brave one. But anyway, I know that I'm gonna die and I accept that fact. But what keeps me going in what I do is that I know there's people other than me.
This is Omicron? Hope they save me a diving suit.
Probably not. But there are people other than me, and I know that there are generations that are gonna come after me. So even though all that I have will one day fade away into the blackness and I will be forgotten somewhere along the line, I know for a fact that there are going to be other people that come after me. So I live my life for them.
The WoW doesn't know any better. Quality of life isn't something it thinks about, nor what really defines a human. This is something I think that's pretty amazing about the game itself. The perceived villain is something that had to face all of these questions itself, and it decided to answer them. It redefined what life was, it redefined what it meant to be human, and it protected that at all costs.
Man, what I loved is this was so thought-provoking. And it makes you really consider what it, like, going back to the very original question, what is consciousness? Makes you wonder how to really define it. And there was even, you know, if you think back to the scene with Lindwall where we kind of euthanized her under her own wishes. You could argue that it was, like, easier, almost, to let her go because she was a human. Whereas, like, the robots, I think back to the very beginning with Carl, who was, like, being tortured, when we flicked that switch, you felt terrible. You felt terrible, but it's because I think, for me, if anything, like, this has caused me to kind of try to think to myself, like, how to define, you know, life and consciousness, without getting, like, too deep here, but I think it's about like, trying, if that makes sense. The example I guess keep going back to Lindwall is, like, she was kind of done, right? And she is she gave up. She's like, I'm done. It's over. There's no way. Even though I'm the last surviving human, there's just no way I can do it. And when you think about Carl or the others that were like quote unquote robots, they really wanted to be there and they believed and they were like, I can do this. I can survive. Like, it's that will to survive, right? I'm not saying that you're not human if you don't have a will to survive, but it's certainly had a pretty big impact.
This shit just makes you think forever about everything. The concept of transferring versus copying alone is just mind-blowing because you know that it leaves behind something that you only recently considered yourself.
But now this reaches a whole new level of weird just because that was me. And the game is putting it in a different perspective because the game is translating into, instead of me staying in the suit and obviously the game ends and then the other character goes on, it's forcing me the perspective that I moved from that suit and then my consciousness continues from that point. But the ethics of it is different because it's not necessarily, it's a continuation for the person in the new suit, it's not a continuation for this Simon right in front of me. How messed up is that? Seriously, how messed up is that? Man.
You can't deal with it as easy as other games when they give you their choices. They get you into the mindset very early on. The most innocuous choice to answer a call puts you in the mind frame to consider the fact that the game will contain them. You have to start justifying yourself. You need to really go over it. These things require time and definitions and more everything, because it makes you feel wrong. So you keep working at your definitions, you keep justifying what you feel until it sounds right with the rules you make for yourself. Ultimately, all these questions are so difficult because we're talking about life. People simply existing, not something as easy as whether killing a girl is okay to save your own life. This is about what defines life. This sort of question is essentially the most important we can ask ourselves. This is why people have so much trouble with these questions. The life and death aspect really gets to people.
Pretty amazing, right? I mean, the Ark.
Yeah, it's great. Catherine and the guys have really pulled through. They saved us all.
Uh-huh, they sure did. Oh, this is a sad situation. I could pull the plug. I mean, would that be ethical? Is it ethical at all to pull the plug on this living consciousness? The only copy of this person is here, and yet there is a plug that I could pull. Is it merciful to do that? Is it, like, I see that some sort of, like, this cancerous thing, the WoW, is actually, like, it's commandeering living tissue and whatnot to create power for these machines. It doesn't...
supposed to look like?
I mean, the artificial intelligence is obviously trying to keep these things alive. No matter what, it's trying to keep everything alive, and it's trying to accomplish the goal of getting everyone into the Ark.
See you
so
later.
Weird.
Will do.
Like, I could pull the plug here, and I may never come back here. Like, what's the right choice here?
I expected something different.
Man, this is so weird. There's so many choices to make. I almost feel like it'd be merciful. Just stuck here alone in the middle of the ocean.
I'm not the only one who got scanned.
Oh, it's not the right choice, is it?
I don't want to use these clips too much, because I don't want to diminish the point of them, the beauty of them. But Markiplier is the kind of guy who uploads like 1 to 2 videos per day on his YouTube channel, and he kept that up for years. He did take a long hiatus on his channel once in 2015, though. A close friend of his passed away, and it took a huge effect on him personally. This led to him eventually returning and being able to play SOMA.
Now, this is the first game that I've recorded since my hiatus ended, and I'm actually really excited that this is the first game that I'm gonna play, because when I started my channel, the first game I ever did a Let's Play of was Amnesia: The Dark Descent, and this is the next official game by the same company that made that one. So the fact that I'm returning to this one is really, really interesting to me, and I've been waiting for this game for practically years now, because Frictional Games, who's the developer of this game, are incredible at making terrifying experiences.
Knowing every last thing I've explained in this ridiculously long set of videos, combining it with the level of philosophy in each layer of this game that Markiplier actually appreciates, and the personal events of his life, it makes for a very impactful moment when he's playing. It put what could have been just an innocuous choice in a context that meant more as a gaming moment than nearly everything in his playthrough, and it's once again beautifully tragic.
There's one thing that I know in my heart that I would do. I know I wouldn't want to live like that, so...
I'm just not prepared.
No one is.
Let me go!
Ultimately, the people in this universe were desperate and led to the point of just wanting to reach the Ark no matter what it was going to mean for them personally. It was the idea that drove them to their conclusions.
We can fight Catherine. Look at you scanned.
It isn't real.
She's made a paradise. An actual paradise.
None of this is real.
Think of it, Imogen. Eternal bliss among the stars. It's like poetry.
The whole point of all this is to show you how much of it stays with you, how it all lingers in your mind. There is a serious understanding deficit in people. It's almost like people don't want to think about it, and they will actively miss this as an opportunity. As I said previously, you could have a video game where you could have the characters just ask these questions to the audience. But why not create a realistic environment with realistic characters and a turn of events that leads you to these questions by yourself? You may not like it, but it's pertinent to say this at this point in my dissection. Reality is that which, when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away.
I mean, one, I'm going into this totally blind, so I have no idea what to expect, but also, like, this game has a lot of surprises to it. And not just surprises in turn, I'm not talking about jump scares, I'm talking about surprises in how deep and complex that it's turning out to be. Okay, that just drops off into the abyss. And I'm not saying that it's the most complex deep game that I've ever heard of, but I'm actually impressed at how advanced, like, the story that they're going for is. Like, this is deep sci-fi. This isn't even totally sci-fi, it's often philosophical, like, the average gamer being expected to understand philosophical concepts, like, anyway, yeah. So getting average gamers to understand, like, concepts such as this is actually, I'm actually quite proud that they're doing it. Like, I'm not saying it's a bad thing in any way, I'm saying it's a very, very good thing. Like, don't just challenge people in terms of gameplay, but also challenge people in terms of understanding and like, trying to wrap their heads around advanced concepts, you know, it makes people curious. Okay.
So how about we explore some of those guys, some of those people who just didn't get it. Oh, fun times.
SOMA also feels like it has an agenda, like it's got a message it's trying to get out there, but I'm just not sure what that message is. Catherine and Simon often have these heated debates about, you know, right and wrong, humanity, philosophy, and religion, but it doesn't ever really seem to add up to anything.
Really? Really, you understand the topic, the field of discussion, but not quite anything else. Let me guess, as a result of your inability to detect any semblance of a point, you're going to blame Frictional's design.
But it's just a shame that in so many ways this is such a half-baked horror game that doesn't seem to take any risks.
Half-baked. Doesn't take any risks. Frictional decided to focus the entire narrative, atmosphere, story, characters, and send the minds of their players to a place where they would just consider the existential questions, just to think about them. How is that not taking a major fucking risk? For fuck's sake, we know it was a risk since the tirade of so-called reviewers missed the point by a country fucking mile. And Thomas recognized that. But it diminishes the message if you make it blatant.
The result is a game that seems less interested in Simon's story than the ideas it puts forth, ideas about the boundaries of life and self. Which might work in favor of its themes, but it detracts from just how spooky the game can be.
Honestly, that's precisely the point. Simon is not important compared to what Frictional wanted people to think about. Ultimately, you simply absorb the world through him. You could care about him as much as you feel he was defined as whatever you think he was. Some people argue that Simon simply couldn't understand reality or refused to, and it made him annoying as fuck. Like, some people didn't care for his fate when thinking about what the game left for him. Regardless, I want to play something from Errant Signal. He happens to be a reviewer who knows what he's talking about and touches on something that I didn't even think of.
But the idea that you can just summon people into existence from the ether to do your bidding is an underlying theme throughout the game, and I find it far more disturbing and profound. You do it when you snap Catherine in and out of existence by placing the Omni tool down. You do it to Brendan Wan to get his security code. Catherine does it to you when she copies you over to the deep dive suit. The WoW does it to several people to achieve its ends. It's a world where sentient beings aren't born, but popped into existence by being ripped from someone else's being in order to fulfill someone else's needs. And the idea that your being, not your labor or your ideas, but your very existence, is only happening because someone has use of you, and after that your existence itself is disposable, elicits some profound terror in me.
Now, in conclusion about the philosophy, I feel like I could run my mouth about every one of these subjects forever since they're all so fascinating, but my point is that the whole thing is engineered to make you think. You guys need to take these concepts and run with them in your own heads, see where it leads you. Luckily for us, we don't have to deal with these as realities right now, but you can expect this to be reality one day, and philosophy will make a full and terrifying resurgence on that day. Amnesia brought to light some interesting ideas about morality that have been covered in a massive amount of media. Not in any way diminishing its poignancy and delivery, just that it's a commonly covered theme. You know, good, evil, morality, etc. SOMA, however, fucking knocked this out of the park, having such incredibly depressing and horrifying ideas, punctuated by terrifying visuals and a crippling atmosphere. I mean, let's be fair. I didn't have this bloody segment on the topic if I didn't think it proved something important. This kind of stuff holds a lot more meaning to everyone, whether or not they see it. This isn't the kind of thing that people can say, well, I don't think it's interesting to think about, because it's something that concerns every living creature with any sense of consciousness. There isn't enough refined media in relation to these concepts because they aren't fun to think about. They're dreadful. And there is something beautiful about that we can reach the point as an evolved species that we can contemplate what it means to be ourselves. Regardless whether or not you enjoyed my analysis of the philosophy, hopefully I've convinced you that SOMA has an inherent value for daring to create a vehicle to deliver something so dreadful and complex that most media doesn't dare approach it. Possibly because it always ends in shitty writing. Or, far more likely, it gets critically panned by useless pseudo-intellectual hack reviewers who spend all of one day to critically analyze this kind of content and come up with the only answer truly possible, which is, they didn't fucking get it. Oh, I should probably save some of this fire for the last part. Yes, folks, this is the end of part 13. It was a short one, again, but hey, the next part, it's the end. This was philosophy, and the next one is conclusion. I look forward to seeing you there, and for a look back, and a much-needed end to this journey. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.